Welcome to the At the Coalface podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. This podcast is all about what it's really like in the trenches of digital and e-commerce. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the pod. I have the pleasure of welcoming Hakan Steele, also known affectionately in industry as Hawk, from Starshipit to the podcast. Welcome, mate.
Thanks, Jace. It's really appreciate the invitation. Yeah, good to be here.
It's great to have you here. We've known each other, I think, for about 5 or 6 maybe years, maybe even a little bit longer than that. We've worked together, I guess, in the industry for a long time. We've attended a lot of the same conferences. We've been mates on LinkedIn. We run in the same circles, I guess. And when you run in the same circles, you tend to bump into people time and time again, through partnerships and through professional friendships and beyond.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's been a few projects that we've sort of crossed paths on, and yeah, I mean it's always a pleasure to see you at the different events, and I obviously follow your LinkedIn content pretty closely. So yeah, it's been a good journey for the last 5 years or so.
It is, and I think about this every single time I have a podcast with someone that I'm mates with and that I guess I've known for a long time. There's so many cool people in our industry. We really are truly lucky, particularly down here in ANZ. There is just so many really sharp, onto it, switched on people like yourself. And it is a pleasure to be able to, I guess, work in an industry where you've got a lot of people that you respect and that you have an opportunity to do projects with, and you get to know quite deeply over a period of time because you see each other in at times in some very stressful situations mid-project, don't you?
Yeah, 100%, and I fully agree. And I guess my experience outside of Australia and New Zealand is probably a little bit limited. I mean, we're a little bit in sort of Singapore and in the UK, but I do think Australia and New Zealand has this community which I think is amazing. The different sort of people that you see and come across within this community is like no other. And everyone, the retailers, they're so willing to help each other. I think perhaps it's that sort of Antipodean sort of way. As I said, I mean, I'm sure there are other parts of the world with really good communities as well, but I think this one down here is probably quite special. So yeah, I fully support that for sure.
Yep, totally on board with everything you just said there. Now, you are the partnership and sales manager for Starshipit, which is an integrated shipping and tracking and logistics management platform for retailers. You've been with the business for over 5 years now. I think the business is about 8 years old in total, and I obviously knew George and Alex, the founders of the company back in the day, even before you were with the business, when they were sort of building out the product and the platform and sort of trying to make sure that it was fit for purpose, particularly for APAC-based retailers and courier integrations. But before that, you've been involved with couriers obviously before as well, or courier companies, territory manager with Toll Group. Then before that, you worked in a variety of I guess, retail-facing roles and positions. So you're pretty well placed to, I guess, understand the retail industry and the logistics industry in ANZ.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I had my first job out of school. Actually, I ended up as a customs broker, so doing a lot of the sort of customs clearances for commercial goods coming into the country, and actually export clearances as well. So I had a little bit of a handle on it from an early age, and then sort of left it behind me and did a few other things. And it's amazing how sort of drawn on that experience from my first job out of school. I've actually there's been a lot of knowledge that I've had to sort of pull up out of the depth. But yeah, and also I guess I've had a small business, not in retail, but I've had a small business for myself. So I do actually, I think just having a genuine interest in business is it's always going to be helpful when you're talking to business owners. And so yeah, I do see a lot of the same sort of challenges. Obviously, my business was actually in tourism, but certainly pleased I am not in that anymore.
Yeah, tough time if you're in tourism at the moment with pretty much no tourism apart from domestic tourism happening right now. So yeah, we definitely feel, and I've said this to I guess other people that I've had on the pod and other people in the industry. We are, and I'm sure you can comment on this as well. Because of COVID, our industry has literally had a rocket ship put underneath it. And then you combine that with, I guess, the strains internationally of that growth, particularly of e-commerce and omnichannel as a result of COVID. And then you combine that with, I guess, because of that volume increase, the massive strains that that's put on international supply chains and manufacturing and sort of the gaps that you help businesses fill. You guys are right. You're kind of in the eye of the storm right now in terms of servicing omnichannel businesses with that. And we'll talk a little bit more, I guess, about the technology, but I guess maybe if we could just get your thoughts from truly being in the eye of the storm of e-commerce and omnichannel right now.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a really good way you put it there, the eye of the storm. So I guess there is a storm, really, isn't it? There, I think we're in boomtown as far as e-commerce goes and digital, and yeah, I mean, you said it absolutely correctly. But on the flip side, there is a real challenge for those small businesses actually getting their hands on the inventory to be able to sell. And, I think, there's going to be a big challenge to come. That whole supply chain you can just almost hear it groaning at the seams. Flights are down, space on ships is down. I saw an image of a commercial flight actually the other day where they had a whole sack of parcels just seat belted into like a passenger plane. So look, I mean, yeah, space is at a shortage. And speaking to a customer the other day, actually, you may have seen it on the news. Zuru Toys, I think they were talking about containers coming from China, and they were used to paying sort of $3,000-$4,000 for a container to come on down. And that's actually up to about $20,000 now for a container down to this part of the world anyway, down to New Zealand. So there's some big challenges. But yeah, certainly right now, the couriers themselves, I think the networks are just under this huge strain. The volumes that are going through is just phenomenal. I mean, we had our busiest day as far as labels printed through, like shipping labels printed through Starshipit. We had our busiest day ever, I think, about a week ago. It was about 500,000 labels that came through Starshipit just in one day.
Wow, lots to unpack in that. I'm certainly hearing the exact same thing that you are from pretty much every retailer, whether that be B2B, D2C, or B2C that I'm dealing with at the moment. Lead times for containers from almost anywhere, but particularly from China, blowing out 4, 8, 12 weeks longer than is typical, and 4 to 5 to 6 times the cost of shipping that container from around the world, whether that be from China, Vietnam, Singapore. It doesn't really matter almost where it comes from, but if it's coming down to ANZ, it's 5 to 6, maybe in some cases 7 times what it was 24 months ago. And that's obviously bearing itself out in terms of retail price inflation. We're seeing that already. And I've also heard that from a supply chain perspective for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and Christmas, that many retailers are basically just saying, hey, we're going to take this as an opportunity not to discount during this time, because we're not going to have enough stock to supply the demand as it is. So why would we go out there and court super price sensitive customers with massive discounts when we don't need to? So actually, in some respects, it's a double-edged sword. You're right in that retailers can't necessarily get their hands on enough stuff based on their forecasts of where they're going to be by Christmas time. But by the same token, they're not taking a hiding on margins either. They're just jacking up their prices based on the costs that they have to pass on to be able to be profitable as a business wherever they think they can, whilst still being competitive in the marketplace. But they're just not doing the extreme level of discounting. I think we got to a place in our industry, if I'm honest, where basically many retailers relied on massive discounting to drive demand. And I think that was never going to be sustainable in the long term anyway. And so this has really reset the industry. And I mean, COVID has reset many areas of our aspects of our entire culture, frankly. But, if we look at it just from an industry standpoint, it has really reset how a lot of players in our industry behave and operate because of those supply chain constraints. And then when we look at the compounding changes that are coming to third-party cookies and iOS, this cheap acquisition model, this cheap digital acquisition model that has been in place historically over the last, say, 5 to 10 years, say, for example, that's coming to a rapid end. And so brands are really starting to realize, from my perspective, of what I'm seeing is there's a greater dialogue than ever before about customer retention, customer remarketing, customer lifetime value, and making sure that you stay sticky as a brand with your customers by staying very close to those customers and treating them very well and treating them like gold, because just going out and replacing them is getting ever more expensive and ever more difficult to do. And so also, merchants are more careful, I guess, about the customers that they acquire now, so that when they go and they build out those lookalike audiences, they're not building a lookalike audience out of hyper price sensitive customers who are not brand loyal.
Yeah, 100%. And I just going back to what you said about the discounting as well. So yeah, I think you're right. There was a little bit of whispers about a lot of customers starting to go down that route. I mean, yeah. For a long time, it's just been discount during that period, and then a few sort of black sheep went off and said, no, this is we're not going to be discounting at this time. Some people followed, some didn't, and this will be, I think you're probably right, this will probably be 1 year that they decide, okay, we're gonna do this experiment, because we just don't have the actual the goods to sell. And it's interesting, I was just reading something on LinkedIn this morning about in Australia how the actual volumes around the peak season previously, certainly in Victoria, really dropped last year, because they were spiked so much between July and October. They skyrocketed, and then they just dropped because everyone had done their online shopping, and the stock just wasn't quite there, hadn't quite been replenished. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we saw the announcement by AusPost, I think it was a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago, where they shut down collections from e-commerce businesses for 4 days to try to let their network catch up with the demand and actually get back to their target timings for deliveries, particularly within metro regions within Australia. So I think that term groaning, the logistics networks around the world groaning under the weight of e-commerce is absolutely accurate. You couldn't have put it better. And I think we're seeing that all the way from the majors like New Zealand Post and Australia Post, all the way down to the more minor, smaller local carrier services, local carrier providers, as well as international carriers. And I think that's also being borne out when we look at large global businesses like Walmart and Amazon. In the cases of Walmart, I see that they're buying container ships now, or doing exclusive charters of container ships, to where instead of just having consolidated freight of their containers on with a bunch of others, they're actually chartering the entire bloody container ship to guarantee shipment of their goods around the world. And obviously with Amazon, they're building out their entire fulfillment network. It's not just last mile anymore. They obviously got their own planes, and it wouldn't surprise me if they came out with their own container ship soon too. So I think that the biggest players in the market are doing some pretty radical maneuvering to ensure supply chain for themselves. And that leaves, I guess, every medium-sized and small retailer and small business scrambling for the scraps, so to speak. But I really do see this as quite a significant reset. And I think that even with rolling lockdowns continuing both here and in Australia and in many other places around the world, I see that sometime, probably within the next 18 months, the entire industry will be forced to adapt. So I don't think this is a permanent logistical nightmare and snarl up globally, because where there is constraint, there's also equal opportunity. And I think that there are some of the biggest capital hoarders in the world and capital allocators in the world are pouring literally billions of dollars into supply chain, both technology as well as hardware and infrastructure. And when we look at some of the announcements, for example, even Google's announcement today that they've come out with a new supply chain management cloud technology, and that announcement literally was just released today, to help even medium-sized businesses and larger manage their supply chain better through digital twinning. I think initiatives like that are slowly but surely going to get supply chains back to a state of semi-normalcy. But I think the short term is nothing but pain.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think I just want to go back to what you were saying about Australia Post and even New Zealand Post, you know switching off their pickups for a little bit. I mean, I know New Zealand Post didn't switch off their pickups, but they did sort of put a cap on some of those volumes. But I think one point I really want to sort of make is this is just a great example of where a retailer can use sort of multiple delivery options in their strategy. So not giving all of their volumes to one particular carrier, but using a variety, because we see it all the time. Every carrier has their own strengths and weaknesses. What one carrier is really good at, that another will be really good at a different aspect. So having several carriers, strings to your bow really is going to be really helpful. So you can sort of easily direct volume through a different provider, instead of having to have a fixed integration to one, and then if you have to switch one off, then you're pretty stuffed. So that's one thing I would say in preparation for this happening again is using or having several carriers up your sleeve in this situation.
Absolutely, and that leads probably quite nicely into the discussion about Starshipit and what it is. So I'll describe what Starshipit is from my perspective, because I have had the privilege of working with you on it before. But after I'm done sort of describing it, then you can poke holes or add anything you like to sort of how I describe the platform. So really, you are the glue or the plumbing that allows merchants to easily connect their either e-commerce system or their back office fulfillment system, whether that be an ERP, order management system, a warehouse management system, however it is that they actually fulfill goods from an own warehouse, or in some cases, obviously via 3PL and 4PL that may use you as that carrier integration middleware platform. You are effectively a middleware platform that sits between a merchant's operational systems and transactional systems and the carriers themselves. And what that means is you facilitate the ability for the con notes and the other lodgement and documentation requirements for a shipment to go out. You send that information to, like, the size and the weight of a particular parcel. You send that off to a carrier that you're integrated with and that the merchant has an account with. You then get back effectively a quote for shipping that item via your service, and also you generate the tracking label and the address label that the merchant then can put on their parcels to get them out the door and get them collected by the carrier. So really, you facilitate that entire process between, instead of having merchants having to manually key into the carrier's web interface, say, for example, for their consignment notes, having to manually type in a shipment, manually typing in the address details, manually basically copy and paste from their operational system into the carrier's systems. You do all that automatically. So you pick up all the order information, you pick up the delivery address, you pick up the information around the size and the weight of the shipment, you get that into the carrier's hands, and then you get the tracking detail out of the carrier's hands and back into those operational systems on behalf of the merchant.
Mate, you've left me very few holes to pick in that. Did a very, very good job. So you're 100% right. So we, as you said, the glue that sort of, facilitates connecting the merchant's tech stack, whether it be their e-commerce platform or any ARP to the carrier accounts. So, at the very core of it, you're right. So we get involved in sort of automating that order fulfillment process, so getting rid of any manual entry around addresses and order details to be able to produce that con note or that shipping label. So that's at the very core of it. It's used in the warehouse to facilitate that journey and essentially just automate it. But there's a couple of other places that we do get involved as well. So merchants often use us for facilitating live shipping quotes on their checkout. So, having a flat rate and one delivery option, that works in a lot of cases. If you're just selling the same thing to the same sort of place time and time again, then you can generally get away with that. But when you do have random orders, large orders, or random destinations that those orders might come from, then the shipping aspect really does eat into your profits. So the other way to do it is by offering multiple shipping options on your checkout, and then we can facilitate having a live shipping quote next to each one of those. It's a dynamic price next to each one of those options, which we're essentially just doing an API call to the merchant's Courier accounts, so then their own negotiated rates, which is returned, and then Starshipit can actually put that on the checkout for the customer to see exactly what the shipping costs for that particular order. So that's another place that we do get involved. But then we also get involved at the other end of the journey, being post-purchase. So as everyone knows, as soon as the order is placed and out the door, it's certainly not over with. There's a very, very important couple of days that happens after you've handed that order over, and that's the transit time, right? So at the moment, there are a lot of struggles around transit times. I think people during COVID and that sort of thing, they are a little bit more understanding perhaps, but only if they're getting sort of decent communication. So that's where we come in as well. So we can facilitate tracking notifications that are really highly customizable and personalized for the merchant. The merchant obviously designs them and then chooses how many of those notifications, both email, SMS, go out to the shopper. But also they can design, their own branded tracking page, which as the whole freight industry is extremely boring. So sending your customer to for example, the Australia Post website to track their order, it's a really massively lost opportunity when they should be going to a much more engaging experience, something that looks and feels like your website. We can feed through all of the scans of that parcel, so they know exactly where it is, but it's just another chance for a merchant to sort of engage with them and, be hit with their, your promotions and all that sort of thing. So yeah, those are the sort of different aspects that we do get involved. So at checkout, during dispatch, and then post-purchase.
Makes absolute sense. And I guess if we look at just the technical aspect of where you integrate, depending, I guess, on a retailer's size or complexity or the way that they manage their fulfillment operations, it differs based on their maturity, right? So if they're a really small business, and that's what I do like about Starshipit, is you do scale up as a business scales, right from the point of being super tiny, and maybe they're only doing 2, 3, 4, 5 orders a day on a Shopify site, and that's really all they've got. They've just got Shopify. They don't have an ERP. They don't have an inventory management system. They don't have a warehouse or even an order management system per se. And really, you become, for those really small businesses in particular, all the way up to, say, a mid-size e-commerce business or an omni-channel business, you become almost like the order management system for that business. So you automate the downloading of orders, say from a Shopify or a BigCommerce, into your platform. Then they do a manual pick, pack, and dispatch operation, but then they use your platform to, I guess, trigger the fact that, hey, we've got this packed, we've got this ready to go. We need to download the address label to put on there, and we know this is going to go out the door. And then you will automatically back into those e-commerce platforms, a Shopify, BigCommerce, and Magento. You'll update the status to shipped. You will also inject that tracking information into those e-commerce platforms, which then can trigger off all of the standard transactional email workflows through those platforms as appropriate. So you really do, you fulfill a really important piece. But then I guess if you move up the maturity stack of a business, and let's say they do have an ERP, they do have a distributed order management system, or they do have or a warehouse management system that is managing the pick, pack, and dispatch process, and really all you're doing at that point is integrating with the carry off the backside of that. So in that scenario, instead of integrating with the e-commerce platform, you're going to integrate with the ERP, the OMS, or the WMS, so that after the pick, pack, the pick, pack process is complete, really they're just using you for the dispatch process, the labeling and dispatch process. So where your system hangs off of or integrates with will in large part be down to how mature that business is and what other systems are in play at that time. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, in most cases when the customer sort of comes to us and they're sort of just getting started, we will integrate their Starshipit account direct to their e-commerce platform, and also even their marketplaces as well. So whether it be eBay, Amazon, Catch. So we've got a whole lot of those integrations, and we import the orders. But as you said, as they scale, they're going to implement an inventory management system or an ERP, and then we've got pre-built integrations with all of those as well. So then we would just essentially remove those original ones and point it to the new platform where we'll receive the orders. And as you said, I mean, they're all two-way integrations. So we also reconcile it back up in the platform further upstream and inject the tracking number as well. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's fair to say our bread and butter is definitely the SMEs, but we've got a lot of customers that are still fulfilling out of their garage or their spare bedroom, and it's great. But then we've got the likes of, well, as you know, like Health Post, Showpo, Princess Polly, some of those bigger enterprise ones down this part of the world as well. So yeah, there's some good household names. The point being, it does scale with the merchant as they grow.
And I guess the other benefit of going with something like a Starshipit versus the old Tomando, back in the day when Tomando kind of was one of the first cabs off the rank to try to do this carrier integration. But in the Tomando model, they used to have the relationship with the carriers themselves, and then if they were effectively a reseller of those services to the merchant. Whereas you guys, you don't get in between, except for the case where with New Zealand Post, for example, where your product is white labeled as eShip. And so, New Zealand Post didn't go out and build their own carrier integration with their own network. They just leverage yours and effectively white label it. And then the only carrier that's available through their integration is New Zealand Post, obviously, because they provide that as a service for free to the merchants that are using New Zealand Post exclusively. And so that's great for them. It's great for you. It's great for the merchant because it's a one-stop shop in terms of services and integrations. But I guess going beyond that, in a multi carrier scenario like you were describing, where it's wise for merchants to have multiple relationships with multiple carriers, whether that be just as a backup supply chain supplier for them in terms of being able to fulfill that last mile, but also in cases where they've got a mixed catalog of products. They might be selling furniture and they might be selling homewares, and obviously you need a bulk goods carrier for the furniture, and you need maybe a small local courier for some homewares that are small and relatively light volumetrically. And so I guess you don't try to get into that area where you're a reseller of those services, adding a markup on top of the courier services to your merchants. They will have a relationship directly with those carriers. They will have negotiated rates based on, say, their annual volumes and annual spend and whatever else the individual carrier is looking at when they set their prices for that particular merchant. And really, you just provide the plumbing between the API key that the carrier provides to the merchant, your system, and the merchant system of choice.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we describe ourselves as what we call enablers. So we're sort of enabling a merchant to do business with their chosen carrier who they have a relationship, they've negotiated their own rates with. So I guess we work differently than perhaps other platforms in that sense. We don't clip the ticket, we don't add a margin, we don't make any money whatsoever on the freight component of that parcel that's being shipped. So I guess it's fair to say our whole focus goes into the actual technology, or as you said, the plumbing of it. So there's no distractions around trying to resell courier services, and we're not interested in pushing one particular courier over another, because as I said, they've all got different sort of strengths and weaknesses. And we're just there to sort of facilitate it and enable those retailers to do it, rather than aggregating their services and making money that way. So yeah, that's you've nailed it really. And we're quite we think this is a much better way to work. I think as far as retailers go, then if you're you might be selling stuff on Trade Me, you might be selling one or two orders a week, then you probably don't need a platform like Starshipit. But I think if you're doing more than sort of a few a day, then you've got a really good case to go to a carrier and say, listen, I've got this business, it's really cranking, and they're going to give you some pretty sharp rates directly. and you're not going to be stuck with a middleman that's clipping the ticket on it. And you're actually just building a relationship for the long term as well. So, you know, as you scale, you're going to be able to go to them and say, look, we've given you all this volume, and, you know, this is the way it's going. And they can actually sort of, you know, look after you from right from the start.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'd like to add to this is that it does, you know, something like Starshipit does allow for merchants to be more agnostic around the carriers that they use. Whereas historically, like before technologies like Starshipit, it was almost like changing banks, changing carriers, right? Especially when, you know, back in the bad old days, because you and I have been doing this for a very long time. I've been doing it for over 20 years. And I know that carrier integrations, like custom carrier integrations, were really complex, particularly with various different, not just e-commerce platforms, but various different back office systems as well. And they were almost always bespoke, one-off custom integrations that had to be built. And they were, you know, they were a little bit fragile. They were a little bit complex. And whenever the carrier would change an API endpoint or change the way they do something, you'd have to update that integration. It was really hard and really painful. And you kind of absorb a lot of that pain on behalf of merchants and what that allows them to do, instead of treating every carrier integration as this one-off, highly custom, unique integration. You're saying, no, we're going to maintain that. We're going to deal with all the changes in the APIs. We're going to deal with carriers that are maybe still in the Stone Age a little bit and do everything via CSVs. We're going to wear all that pain of building and maintaining those integrations so that merchants don't have to, and it gives them the flexibility over time to chop and change and slice and dice their fulfillments as they see fit at that time.
Yeah, and that's right. So not much has changed actually, Jason. Like those carrier integrations, you know, some are better than others, obviously, but you know, this is what we do. This is what we do day in, day out, and you know, perhaps every tech company thinks this, but I'm sure we've got the smartest developers out there. Yeah, so you're right. We absorb all of that, and you know, the other aspects as well. People often sort of toss up between doing a direct integration with the carrier and using a platform like Starshipit. So, you know, our user interface has so many of the settings that you would have to get a developer to change if you wanted to make a change to that particular integration. You know, things like signature required or authority to leave. You know, you can switch those things on and off. We've got the really powerful rules engine, which, you know, you just wouldn't have if you did a direct integration. It would just be all so custom and so hard. So yeah, we try and as you said, flexibility is the key word, keeping it agile, and that's where I think a lot of the value is for those customers. Yeah, over doing a direct integration for sure.
And when George and Alex obviously first launched Starshipit as the co-founders of the platform and the brand, what was the very first cab off the rank in terms of integration? Was it just New Zealand Post? Is that what it first launched with, and you've just continued to build out further integration since then?
I think it was actually, yeah, it was, well, at the time it was called Courier Post and also DHL. So Alex, he is the founder and owner of Coast. They do really beautiful marine beanbags and outdoor furniture and that sort of thing. So he was the guy with the original problem, right? And he was, you know, he had multiple carriers that he was using, multiple systems across his computer, and often he was having to use several different computers to print the labels just for different carriers. So he had the problem. It was driving him crazy, and you know, that's when he met George. And George, being a developer, he obviously took that and wanted to have a little tinker and solve the problem. But you're right. I mean, it was Courier Post and I think DHL at the time were the first ones, and I believe you know, between BigCommerce and Shopify as far as the first e-com integration goes as well.
And how many carriers do you guys integrate with as of now?
Yeah, so right now I think it's up to 30. So most of them are relevant for New Zealand and Australia. Well, most of them are relevant for Australia, and then we've just actually added quite a few for New Zealand here. So the Freightways group, that being New Zealand Couriers, Post Haste, Castle Parcels, all those guys. But also we've added a lot recently for the Northern Hemisphere. So the UK and Europe, there's you know, the likes of Royal Mail, DPD, Deutsche Post, and all of those guys. And we've also, added, who else we've got? UPS. You'll probably see a few more US-centric ones pretty soon as well. Can't give away too much, but
Of course, competitive advantage there, mate. No, I get it. I get it. But, I guess what this calls out to me is the fact that being so focused on this laser sharp niche, which is awesome for you and awesome for the retailers. You go from one or two domestic carriers in New Zealand to, and one international carrier being DHL, because at that time they were buddied up with New Zealand Post, obviously. And now they're back independent again. You go from one or two to 30 or over 30. That shows, I guess, over the last 8 years, what the scale of development effort and investment has been back into the platform. And then I know that you guys have made massive developments into the parcelization capability of the platform, in the rules engine part of the platform, into the surcharging capabilities of the platform, in the ability for specific rules to be applied to certain product types and categories as well, or to split a catalog and say, hey, we want to send these products to this carrier, we want to send these products or these orders to this carrier. You really have, I guess, broadened what the platform is capable of since those very early nascent days. And do you want to speak a little bit about, I guess, the product development roadmap? And is this something that is very much, I guess, engagement led, meaning you engage with merchants, you uncover new problems or new challenges or new carriers that they're already working with, and you say, hey, we'll put that on our development roadmap because we can't necessarily meet your need today, but hey, in 6 or 8 or 12 weeks or 6 months, we will be able to, and we'll come back and see you when we can.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, one of our values at Starshipit is customer as a compass, meaning, we have developed this product in response to customers' sort of, their ever-changing needs, right? So, and those needs are always changing, but we, of course, like any tech company, we're getting one-off feature requests all the time. But we are certainly just led by, both our customers, but also, partners as well. So, they've always got their ear to the ground as far as what merchants are looking for and that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's exactly right. So we get requests, and we're very sort of honest about it. No, we can't do that right now, and that, we will certainly take a good look at it. Should there be, a few requests on top of yours, and then we take that away. We'll just make sure, technically it's going to be a good fit, and it's actually going to work and work to the high standards that we sort of keep as well. So yeah, we definitely live up to that value of customer as a compass in that respect. But the other one that we do have as well is being agile from day dot. That's another value of ours, meaning, we do want to sort of have sort of quick turnarounds in our product. We test very, very thoroughly, but we want to be agile and be able to turn these out when they are really required by the market.
Yeah, it makes sense. So you're almost project led or customer led in the sense of your product development pipeline. And I guess most major tech companies would consider themselves to be customer led. But I guess in your space, because of the nature of being that bridge between an existing supplier or a carrier that they're looking to take on as a business, really standing in that gap and holding the hand of the merchant alongside them as a true partner, it means that you to a degree, you have to be project or merchant led, because that is what allows you to, I guess, get your technology placed inside those merchants. Because if you simply don't have a connector, well, then there's nothing for them to adopt, right?
Yeah, you couldn't have said it better.
And I guess in some instances, are there custom integrations with your API endpoints as well? So let's say you're working with a merchant and they want to do something weird and they want to integrate with a system or a backend system or a carrier that you're not integrated with, and it's a little ways down your pipeline, or it's maybe in the never just because it's not that popular or common. I'm guessing that there are some integration middleware providers that are working with merchants today who would integrate as a custom integration into your APIs instead, and maybe you just fulfill the integration to the carrier, for example. So you provide an API layer in your own right, so that you don't necessarily have to go out and build every single integration, but it is open enough to where custom integrations can be built with your platform too.
Yeah, that's right. So we have, I think, again, it's about 30 pre-built integrations natively within Starshipit to all sorts of different, platforms that are popular in our space. There's obviously a lot that we don't integrate with as well. So that's where now we've got an open API, which, a lot of customers have used to build integrations to the rest of their tech stack, to give them access to all of the carriers. Again, they could choose to integrate with 3 different Courier APIs, or they could just integrate with one, being Starshipit, and they still get all of those carriers sort of available to them. So yeah, it's an open API, which we've had some really good feedback on.
Brilliant. And just changing gears for a moment, what do you make of the consolidation in the market that we're witnessing literally as we speak? First of all, we're seeing valuations of any tech company related to e-commerce omnichannel just stratospheric. I mean, obviously we've got the MailChimp sale yesterday, for $12 billion, and we've got valuations pretty much across the entire tech ecosystem related to e-commerce and omnichannel just going stupid numbers. We've got VTEX going public recently at an astronomical valuation. We've got in fact lots of international tech and e-commerce and omnichannel companies going public right now, specifically because valuations are off the Richter. We've got VC capital sloshing around looking for a home and just being thrown at the wall and of e-commerce and seeing what sticks. We've got massive investments in carriers and infrastructure, and so we've just got this and I personally don't think it'll last. It can't last. It's so ridiculous. Valuations are so crazy that there's no way that this is sustainable, and I think it's what happens when the music stops. But from your perspective, what you're seeing in the marketplace, we're seeing, the likes of Sin7 growing in influence in our part of the world. They've acquired Deer Systems and a couple of other competing technologies in the market. And, it's unclear whether they're going to roll that into core Sin7 or whether they're going to maintain those separate quasi ERPs as standalone products. We're seeing a lot of acquisition, even of Neato by Meropost, another local player that sort of had their own OMS/WMS, being Bonero, and then of course the back end of Neato is effectively a de facto OMS for most businesses that use the Neato platform, which is now Meropost Commerce Cloud. So we're seeing a lot of, consolidation. We're seeing a lot of growth. We're seeing, COVID has created some massive dislocations of capital, of investment, of technology. Obviously we saw Oracle a few years ago acquire NetSuite because they needed a mid-market cloud native ERP platform to go to market with that wasn't at the stratospheric price of a traditional Oracle product. We're seeing massive changes, I guess, in the infrastructure that drives and runs and underpins our entire space. What do you make of that, and how do you think of that through the context of Starshipit and your plans for the future?
Oh, look, I probably couldn't add too much to that, but I do see these, and you're right, these are just eye-watering numbers that you see banded around, and a lot of people in our ecosystem, or a lot of sort of partners in our ecosystem. Unleashed was another one, PeopleVox. So it's certainly around, and yeah, I probably wouldn't be equipped too much to talk about our plans for the future and any of that sort of thing. So I probably won't. I'll probably stay clear of that one if that's all right, Jace.
Yeah, that's okay. You'll delicately bow out of that one. That's fine. That's fine. Look, I guess it's just more validation that you are witnessing. I guess.
Oh
yeah. And of course, I saw and I'm very familiar with the Descartes acquisition of PeopleVox and some of the other major platforms on the logistics side of our industry and the order and warehouse management side of our industry. There's just been such an inventory management side, as you say, with Unleashed and Deer and a few others. It feels like a lolly scramble at the moment, is what it feels like to me, where the big major companies are going, hey, for us to level up, we almost have to both acqui-hire and acquire a technology to plug a gap it goes back to that age-old question of buy or build, right? And so what we're seeing is the biggest players in the market with vast access to vast pools of cheap capital. They're going, well, why would we build it when we can just buy it and it's best of breed already out of the box, and we can integrate it into our existing ecosystem and level us up super quickly. So we're not just acquiring the tech, we're also acquiring the developers, the IP, the smarts, everything that goes along with these businesses and everything that they've built out over the last decade. We're acquiring the whole lot. We're not just acquiring a piece of technology.
And the customers as well, which they will obviously be, looking to upsell as well. So you're right. And the other one that actually came across, well, it's probably a couple of months ago now, but TradeGecko. I know the actual sale went through quite a while ago, but that TradeGecko will be decommissioned now as well. So if you're not aware, it's the inventory management system out of Singapore. Yep. So yeah, that will be sunsetting. I think maybe early next year. Could be wrong. We'll find out.
Yeah, and I guess that's I guess you raise a very, very valid point, which is that when you are selecting your tech stack, whether that be, you're going to market yourself and you're doing an RFP, or you're writing your own BRD, or you're working for a consultant like me, or an agency, it almost doesn't matter, but you do really have to, I guess, ask some really hard due diligence questions, because as we saw, back in the day with Bronto being acquired with NetSuite and then NetSuite being acquired by Oracle, sometimes these big fish eat little fish acquisitions, and then ultimately they put a bullet in Bronto's head from a marketing automation standpoint. That left a lot of Bronto merchants kind of high and dry, and they had to make sort of last minute jumping off of and it was telegraphed to the market that it wasn't like they killed it over a month, but and it was telegraphed to the market. But if you had a big integration with Bronto, if you had a very expensive integration with Bronto and custom work done on that platform, and then all of a sudden you are now looking at migrating to an Emarzis or a Klaviyo or a .digital, that was not an insignificant migration to make for those merchants at that time. And we've seen Emarsys be acquired by SAP. I think it's going back about 4 months ago or 5 months ago now that acquisition happened. So I think, to your point, I think it's really important to align yourself with tech vendors, platform providers, and even implementation partners that are kind of aligned in the direction that you're going in as well. Now, they're always not at liberty to say what might be going on behind the scenes, but it's always worth asking the question, are there any immediate plans to sell the business or to make a radical change in direction strategically of the platform, so that we can make a really informed decision about what is likely to happen with the platform. And again, businesses always have to adapt to surprises that come along, but I think being smart about the partner selection that you make, because at the end of the day, the implementation partner themselves oftentimes will know more about the strategic plans of that platform than what the platform vendor will tell you themselves directly. And so I think that working with somebody who has their finger on the pulse of the market is super mission critical, and in fact probably more critical now than ever before, just because of the acquisitions we're seeing.
Yeah, exactly. It is definitely worth asking that question, and I guess whether you get the right answer or the honest answer or not. But I can certainly say that we've got plenty more that we want to achieve before I think that's even on the table for us. Yeah. So, but you're right. Certainly, I mean, you don't want to be left high and dry like some have been in the past.
Absolutely. Well, look, mate, I have really enjoyed our time together. We are coming down to the end of our time together. What, from a, of the stuff that you can disclose, and even if it's just from a strategic direction of Starshipit, what is on the cards for the platform? What would you, if you forecast out 12 to 18 months from now, what would you ideally like to see Starshipit become, or functionality you would like to see added based on what you're seeing in the marketplace and the changes that are happening at an accelerated rate right now? What do you think Starshipit is going to look like in another 12 to 18 months? Is it just simply a matter of more integrations, more out-of-the-box integrations being there, or is there some core fundamental underlying functionality that you'd like to grow and add to as well in addition to that?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would probably say on that would be, we will be certainly adding more integrations and carriers that are relevant for the Northern Hemisphere. We are, we've got boots on the ground there now, so that's one aspect. Yeah, I mean, we've got a bunch of features that we need to get through, which we are sort of working towards. We're also doing we've been working pretty hard on a few things. So one being, there's been a lot of rule changes around Brexit and international shipping. So we've adapted the platform to sort of meet those. So we've just sort of come through a lot of those sort of compliance things. But the other area that you probably will see a lot of change in is our returns. So we're likely to untake. We're just sort of toying with it at the moment. We've got some really good returns features in Starshipit already, and we do support different ways of doing returns. But it's becoming more and more important in the market, and so I think that could be potentially a focus for us in the next sort of 12 months or so, is to really build out that returns aspect.
That's fantastic, especially when you see something like Loop and some of the other, returns focused platforms out there where they really have kind of made an art out of managing returns for brands and their customers, and trying to make that as seamless as possible. I think having a fully integrated returns management system inside of Starshipit, so that the whole logistics plus reverse logistics is kind of more easily managed through your platform on a localized functionality basis, integrated with all the local carriers. I mean, it absolutely makes sense, right? It feels like a no-brainer as kind of a feature and functionality that just feels like a natural fit with the platform.
Yeah, that's right. And so we actually last year we actually did a sort of a custom returns portal for a customer of ours in Australia. It's a 3PL that uses Starship, and one of their customers required this returns platform. It's actually Microsoft. So we actually built a returns platform for Microsoft. So we've got a lot of functionality there already. The carriers. So yeah, like you said, it does seem like a bit of a no-brainer. We can really build on that and just make it available to be able to roll out to lots of merchants.
Fantastic. Now, final two questions. One is, what would be your recommendation based on your experience living at the coalface of international logistics and carrier integration, everything else? What would be your top tip for retailers to bring efficiency? It doesn't have to be just, hey, implement Starshipit, but what are some of the things you're seeing your top most successful retailers that you work with do operationally as a business to make them more efficient in the time of COVID? And then secondarily, how do people find you? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would say, having a warehouse management system that really understands that whole pick and pack flow and the different sort of layout aspect. We integrate with some really good warehouse management systems. What we mentioned one before, PeopleVox. So a lot of our big merchants, particularly in fast fashion, seem to be using the PeopleVox Starshipit integration, which is really great. Yeah, what was the other one? Oh, how do you get hold of us? So yeah, certainly you can email myself, Hakan.Steele@Starshipit, or come to our website, starshipit.com. And yeah, we'd love to chat.
Nice. Look, mate, I've really enjoyed this. It's been a pleasure going down memory lane with you a little bit and talking about where you guys are at now and what you guys have on the cards. I love the Starshipit platform. I think it's very, very good at what it does, and it fills a super important need for retailers, particularly in the ANZ market, and I really love what you guys do, and you're just a good group of people as well. So I can firsthand experience. I've had merchants that I've recommended it to have implemented it, and they're very, very happy with the Starshipit platform. So I can happily give it. I don't make any money for this. I'm not I can genuinely endorse the Starshipit platform as a platform that I know works, and I know it works well, particularly for merchants in ANZ. So good on you, mate, for helping to develop something so exciting and something so mission critical for businesses. And I wish you guys all the very, very best for the future, because I think you guys bloody deserve it.
Mate, thank you very much, Jace. It's really kind, and it means a lot coming from yourself. Obviously respect you in the industry. So thank you.
Cheers, buddy. We'll talk again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye. Yeah. Thanks for listening to the At the Coalface podcast. If you want more At the Coalface, you can subscribe to our premium e-commerce and digital newsletter, At the Coalface Digest.